up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com, covering your Kansas City Chiefs. And we got some news to talk about today, starting with the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs brought in free agent running back J.K. Dobbins on a free agent visit earlier today. Dobbins, the former Baltimore Ravens running back, is a free agent after finishing up his rookie deal in Baltimore. And if you guys aren't too familiar with J.K. Dobbins, he was a fairly high draft pick a few years ago. He's in the same draft class as CEH, who we'll get to in a little bit here. But Dobbins has averaged 5.8 yards per carry for his career and has found the end zone 13 times in 24 games with the Baltimore Ravens. But the biggest problem with Dobbins is that he's really struggled to stay healthy throughout his career. But that said, I would really like to see the Chiefs take a flyer on him and bring him in on a one-year deal. Yeah, the injuries are going to scare some people away because he's had consecutive years with season-ending injuries. He's torn his ACL, he's torn his Achilles, and even though that is a lot for a running back to go through and still be productive, he's only 25 years old, so he's still pretty young. I think he has more upside than CEH, and really the CEH news goes in with this because the Kansas City Chiefs went on to re-sign CEH not long after this Dobbins news came out. But the two bits of news go hand in hand because I have a pretty strong opinion on each of them. And let's just kind of transition into the news that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is re-signing with the Kansas City Chiefs on a one-year deal. So that comes from Ian Rappaport. And again, this all ties back into J.K. Dobbins and my thoughts there on that potential signing because I'm sure people are asking the question, is J.K. Dobbins still an option after bringing back CEH? My first reaction, though, to the CEH re-signing, I don't get it, man. Sometimes I just get really frustrated with this team's tendency to not know when to move on from a guy, not know when it's time to let go. This feels like Brett Veach kind of still trying to squeeze as much juice as he can out of that draft pick that was CEH a few years ago. But you know, CEH just doesn't move the needle for me, and I know what a lot of people are going to go down to the comments and say, oh, Josh, it's fine, he's just a backup running back, but I don't even think he's good enough to be the backup. I don't think he should be the backup. I think the only justification for bringing back Clyde Edwards-Helaire that is okay with me is if he is just insurance in case the Chiefs don't have the opportunity to draft a guy. Because I think most of us would agree that part of this plan at running back should be to bring in probably a guy on day 3, someone with some athleticism and some juice to add to this running back room, because last year Jerick McKinnon kind of really slowed down. I think he showed his age a little bit and he could hardly make it through the season. We know the story with CEH. He also struggles with injuries, just doesn't have a lot of juice, not a lot of athleticism. So you want to add a guy in the draft most likely that's got some upside and some athleticism. But the problem with adding CEH and what I fear is going to happen is J.K. Dobbins came in for that visit, right? They immediately signed CEH after the visit concluded, which makes me feel like J.K. Dobbins was kind of brought in as leverage for CEH, or J.K. Dobbins was brought in and he said, hey, this is what my price is. The Chiefs said, hey, we're not going there. We'd rather just bring back CEH instead. And so that's what they did. And I even saw a clip from Ian Rappaport on Twitter kind of stating how the Chiefs went back to the comfortable option that they know, which is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He knows the offense, yada, yada. And I just hate hearing that because CEH, yeah, people will say he was better last year, but better how? He still averaged 3.2 yards per carry, which is extremely inefficient, and it was one of his least efficient years since he's been in the league. Like, yeah, he had some nice plays down the stretch, but I feel like people are pumping up CEH a little too much because the expectations were so low for him to begin with that because he did the bare minimum last year, we're treating him as if he's this vastly improved player, and he's just not. If CEH is the third running back, fine, whatever. But I would still try to bring in J.K. Dobbins, and I would still not let that preclude you from drafting a guy. I just think that CEH, we know what he is. It's not very good, and you should be shooting for a little bit higher than that. Because, again, I know people are going to say Joshy's not going to play that much. It's fine as a backup running back, but even those 4 to 5 carries that CEH could get, they can be drive killers, because I've watched CEH on this team for the past 4 years, and he's a drive killer. And yeah, he had some nice plays here and there last season, but still ultimately you would get a couple of those to start off every game, and then the magic would kind of run out and he would go right back to what he was, and you'd get those second and long runs that go absolutely nowhere. And I've also been following this organization long enough to know how they operate to understand that when they bring back a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who they just need to move on from, people say, it's okay, the player's only going to have X amount of opportunities, not a big deal. And then they come in and then they have way more opportunities than any of us were expecting or wanting. Because I remember a couple years ago, with the defense, they brought back Alex Okafor, they brought back Frank Clark, brought back Dan Sorensen, Ben Neiman. Everyone's like, oh, it's okay, those guys are just depth. And then all of a sudden, they were all playing 90% of the snaps. And it's like, no, you can't be doing that. So, yeah, I'm not too thrilled about the news that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was returning, because I just don't think he's even really rosterable, to be honest. And the truth is, if you were CEH and things weren't working out for you in Kansas City, you were a healthy scratch for the last Super Bowl, you didn't really play much at all in this past Super Bowl, the team has drafted guys over you, brought in guys that have started to take snaps from you, wouldn't you want to get a fresh start elsewhere instead of coming back to Kansas City? But the only reason he's coming back here is because no one else wanted him either. There was no market for CEH, and I think that's pretty telling, and that's why, again, I'm just not very thrilled about bringing back CEH. Now, back to J.K. Dobbins. I would not let the CEH signing prevent this team from still bringing in J.K. Dobbins, because the upside is still there, in my opinion. You go back, you look at the 5.8 yards per carry for his career, and that's with a substantial amount of snaps played, 13 touchdowns and 24 games played. Everyone's going to talk about the injuries, but I remember when we signed Jerick McKinnon a couple years ago, coming from the San Francisco 49ers, Jerick McKinnon was coming off back-to-back ACL tears, and everybody thought he was done, and he ended up becoming a mainstay in the Chiefs running back rotation. I think Dobbins, a guy that can take advantage of the outside zone runs that the Chiefs so badly want to do that Pacheco isn't the greatest at, that Clyde Edwards-Helaire certainly can't do. He doesn't have the juice for it. J.K. Dobbins does, and if he can stay healthy, I think he can be an explosive home run threat in the backfield. I would still try to bring him in, man, because then if you do that, I think you're comfortable there. It's not one of the best running back rooms in the league, and yeah, you're kind of scared if someone goes down, but you could still draft a guy, and then I think you're fine, man. I think you'll be fine with that. But I think J.K. Dobbins would raise both the floor and the ceiling, whereas CEH just doesn't really move the needle much at all for me. I also noticed that Nate Taylor of The Athletic that covers the Chiefs said he can confirm Clyde Edwards-Helaire has agreed to a 1-year deal to re-sign with the Chiefs, and then he followed that up by saying, as for J.K. Dobbins, I'm told his visit today was productive for both parties, perhaps a partnership that could happen later this offseason, which to me kind of sounds like the Melvin Ingram thing from a couple years ago where the Chiefs brought him in, and the visit reportedly went well, and then we just kind of never heard anything. The Chiefs moved on with their offseason, and they ended up not getting him. And, of course, they traded a draft pick for him later on, which was just bad asset management, by the way, but that's a whole nother story. But this kind of is similar to that, in my opinion, where it just kind of feels like since they signed CEH so quickly after the Dobbins visit that maybe Dobbins isn't on the table. But I hope he is. We'll see. Then the last piece of news that I wanted to talk about today, and I could make a entirely different video talking about this more in depth, but if you guys don't live in the Kansas City area or you aren't aware of what's going on, but question 1 for the 3/8 sales tax that was already ongoing in Kansas City and Jackson County, and that was the sales tax that was contributing towards the Royals and the Chiefs' existence in Jackson County in Kansas City, Missouri. Residents there were finally able to vote today on question 1, which was to extend that already existing 3/8 sales tax to help fund the Kansas City Chiefs stadium renovations and the Kansas City Royals' new downtown stadium that they're planning on. Now, unfortunately for the Chiefs and Royals, Jackson County residents voted a resounding no for the extension of the 3/8 sales tax. And now that opens the door to both the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals to leave Kansas City, Missouri. Now, I won't get too much into the Royals because I'm here for Chiefs coverage. I don't really care for the Royals, but the Royals are all over the place with their plans, which I think is the main reason why this thing didn't pass. The Chiefs and the Royals were both tied together with this, but I think a lot of people were pissed off about the Royals not really having a plan. They were just saying, hey, give us your money. We promise we'll do good things with it. But they had already changed plans 3 times, or they had 3 different locations picked out for the new stadium. They were changing renderings up until a few days ago. It was just a half-baked plan that they had put on the ballot, and I think that turned a lot of people off. That turned a lot of voters off. And then the Chiefs' plans weren't too much better. But I'm not here to tell you guys whether you should have voted yes or no, and obviously it's over by now, and they've already voted no. But I hope people understand that because of this, this opens the door for the Kansas City Chiefs to leave Kansas City, Missouri, and it also opens up the door for them leaving Kansas City entirely. They could even move to a new state. There's going to be a lot of different cities across the U.S. that would throw a lot of money at Clark Hunt, at the Kansas City Chiefs, to try and get them to move their NFL team there, because every city that doesn't have an NFL team wants an NFL team. Now, of course, if you've been on social media, you've seen a lot of people say, oh my God, the Kansas City Chiefs are moving, and they very well could, but right now that is a big leap of faith because the Chiefs still have their lease with Arrowhead Stadium through 2031, so even if the Chiefs were to leave, it wouldn't be until after 2031, and I would have to imagine that Kansas City, Jackson County is going to work with the Chiefs. I'm not too sure about the Royals at this point, but at least with the Chiefs, they're going to try to work to keep them and try to put something else on the ballot in the future that is a little bit more presentable to voters and is something that they can get on board with. And these are just my personal thoughts, but Clark Hunt seems like a very prideful guy. He seems very prideful of his family and their history, and Lamar Hunt and this stadium, Arrowhead Stadium, was his dream. I find it very difficult to believe that Clark Hunt would truly move the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, I could be convinced that maybe he would move the team to the Kansas side of Kansas City, but I just do not see him leaving Kansas City, and I'm also not too sure if he would ever move the team to the Kansas side, because here's the other thing, is that if they were to move, Clark Hunt would have to pay relocation fees and all kinds of other expenses, and all of that would cost more than the $300 million that he was putting up towards these Arrowhead Stadium renovations. He was asking the taxpayers of Jackson County to pay for the other $500 million. So if Clark Hunt can't even pay for his own $800 million stadium renovations, how am I supposed to believe that he is going to pay all this money to get the team to move to the Kansas side of Kansas City? And I could be wrong, and NFL owners can be ruthless and they'll make a lot of threats, and we've seen this plenty of times now where the owners actually do follow through on their threats. But also it was interesting that Chiefs team president Mark Donovan said in a press conference after they found out that the vote didn't pass that the Chiefs feel like they put forth their best offer for Jackson County, and he said, "We will look to do what is in the best interest of our fans and organization as we move forward." To me, that sounds like the Chiefs are very seriously looking at other options outside of Kansas City. Again, it remains to be seen if they were to ever pull the trigger on something like that, but you know that they're pissed off that this didn't pass, and they will do whatever it takes to get what they want, whether they get that from Jackson County taxpayers or somewhere else. Again, I still question if Clark Hunt would ever really do it. I mean, he won't even give us alternative uniforms because it's not what his dad would have wanted. That's what he says. So to think that he would build an entirely new stadium when Arrowhead Stadium was his dad's dream, I don't know. Clark Hunt is a prideful man, so we'll see what happens. Again, I can make an entirely different video on this topic. It's so much to talk about. But this is definitely a storyline worth following, worth monitoring going forward. And also something else that kind of goes into this is Clark Hunt and his demand that the taxpayers pay for the majority of these Arrowhead Stadium renovations. Clark Hunt is kind of cheap in my opinion, and I know a lot of NFL owners are, and a lot of NFL owners constantly ask for public funding for their stadiums. But Clark Hunt in particular is a cheap guy, and I actually have an article about this coming out on Arrowhead Addict this week, so be on the lookout for that because I dive into a plethora of issues with Clark Hunt and his cash spending. But yeah, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video there, but I want to hear from you guys down in the comments what your thoughts are on today's news. What do you think of J.K. Dobbins coming to Kansas City? What do you think of the Chiefs bringing back CEH? And lastly, what are your thoughts on what took place in Jackson County earlier today with the vote not being passed? Let me know down below, but with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this, and make sure you check out my work on arrowheadaddict.com and showmefootball.com for more. I'll see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs!